Hey everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Monday, everybody. Today we are going to start part one of a two-part series on Mars opposite Jupiter. So this is a pretty big transit. Both planets are slow moving. Jupiter's about to change signs into Aquarius again. And right as it's doing so, it's picking up this big opposition from Mars. It's a big transit to start off our week. So that's what we're going to take a look at. I'm going to start today by just going through some of the main archetypal combinations, and tomorrow we'll dive a little deeper into those combinations and unpack them a little bit more. So that's our plan for now. Let's take a look at the real-time clock and get a feel for what's going on. And I am officially back from vacation by like midweek. So this is like one of two times each year that I kind of take off from doing readings, and everything's pretty low key. I create content, otherwise I'm pretty chilled out, and it always just recharges me so well, and I get so many ideas. So I'm really excited because I've got some really cool ideas for new series coming up, and new content that I'm really excited about. And for me, it's like I don't really come up with my best stuff unless a couple times a year I just take time off to read, reflect, take a step back. And sometimes, to be honest, the content that I create during that time, even though I try to do my best, it ends up feeling a little bit like filler content. So, but this week we're getting back into it with some, hopefully you guys have found it interesting, interesting anyway, but this week we're getting back into it because I've really actually been meditating a lot on this Mars Jupiter opposition. And the reason for that has been that earlier this summer, I started taking lessons at a local studio. And those lessons I started as Mars was coming into, let me just stop this for a second, as Mars was coming into the opposition with Saturn in the square with Uranus. And that really opened the door for me to explore this martial art. And so I've been thinking a lot about martial arts and some of the philosophy that I've listened to a number of who I consider to be very wise jujitsu practitioners talk about. So anyway, as I've been on my vacation for the past couple of weeks, I've been reading a number of different books comparing Taoism and martial arts and other things like that. And I feel like even though I'm such a neophyte, I feel like I've learned a lot in the past month or two. Anyway, so I'm going to go into a little bit of that tomorrow in the sort of philosophical portion of this meditation on Mars opposite Jupiter. For today here, you can see that Mars is in late degrees of Leo, about to change signs into Virgo, where it will then be in Mercury's sign. In the meantime, Mercury is combust right now and it's going to be moving through the conjunction with the sun in the next, over the course of the next week, it'll be making the transition onto the opposite side of the sun. So that's an interesting piece to pay attention to as well, because when Mars goes into Mercury's sign and Mercury is in the process of being reborn, that's important. There's something about the will and the mind, communication and the will that are changing. They're in the process of changing. So I think that's important for us to understand right now, that you've got Mars at the moment in the sun sign. The sun's really empowered, and it's opposite Jupiter, right? Which is also very, really amplifies the energy of Mars. It makes it bigger. But then as soon as this change happens, so let's just watch how this change occurs. If I take Mars forward just a couple of days here, we're going to see about Thursday evening, July 29th, the sun, or Mars will change into Virgo. And then by Thursday, Mars is in Virgo. And that's July 30th. And if we take this forward, you're going to see Mars going through the sign of Virgo and coming into a conjunction with Mercury exalted in Virgo by August 19th. So there is a very significant shift happening for Mars because it's going into the domicile of Mercury, and because Mercury will end up in a conjunction with Mars in its exaltation. So there's something, a reboot, a reconfiguration for Mars. It's pretty significant. I mean, I think it's pretty exciting. I'm going to try to break that down a little bit between now and mid-August. We'll be doing a number of videos on that. But in the meantime, back to the current moment, we go forward and we're going to see that on Wednesday, July 28th, Jupiter retrogrades into Aquarius, where it started off, kind of started off our year with Jupiter in Aquarius, get a little preview of Jupiter in Pisces from mid-May through the end of July. And now we're seeing Mars in Leo opposing Jupiter. And this is going to be Wednesday into Thursday. And you could even give it, I'd give it until Friday or Saturday where you're still going to be feeling it. You should be able to feel it already to some extent. Okay, so that's the transit that we're looking at. You could say that this Mars opposite Jupiter transit is going to perfect on Thursday, but you'll be feeling it all week and probably into, I would say, Saturday. So that's the timeline of the transit. Now let's talk about the archetypal combination. And again, one of the exciting pieces of this transit is watching Mars change into Virgo right after it opposes Jupiter. There's a reconfiguration perhaps of Mars stuff that's going to happen after this confrontation with Jupiter. And I think that could be really good, a wiser, more mature, more thoughtful, more tactful Mars is about to emerge after this kind of more dynamic tension with Jupiter. I would say that one of the ways that could easily translate, and I'll be talking again about this more in future videos, is, pride comes before a fall. If Mars is going to get nice and inflated from an oppositional encounter with Jupiter, but then it's going to switch into the sign of Mercury as Mercury is being reborn in the sign of Leo. Perhaps there's something about will, strength, dominance, pride that's getting looked at, or it's under scrutiny. It's under the microscope somehow. There's lessons about humility or being humbled at the moment. And then after those lessons, we can reconfigure what it means to be strong, or we can become more intelligent or wise about what it means to, be strong, or to be good at something, or to be, or even just an action that we're trying to take in our lifetime. And the way we're going about it is maybe there's too much bravado, and we need to refine it or adjust ourselves in some way, and that the intelligence to do so, we might see that coming through as soon as Mars enters Virgo, which is a really good refining, crafty sign for Mars, where the more intelligent and sort of humble way of using Mars energy can start to present itself. So that's what I'm hopeful for. In the meantime, Jupiter, here we have a planet. Well, here, I like to break these planets down sort of philosophically, because I think that's the best way to really get the most out of their combinations. So if you have Mars, the lesser malefic, this is a planet that, not in and of itself, none of the planets are good or bad, but in human terms, we say, Saturn and Mars in particular bring things that human beings tend to experience as sort of a bummer or challenging. What we can always make something out of them, and depending on their position in the house, by sign, by aspect, they can also become constructively benefic, meaning they can actually help us with things. But generally speaking, Mars cuts, severs, burns, inflames, competes, dominates, is a little rash. And so that's something that, we just got to always be aware of with Mars. Now, why is that? Like, what's the philosophical reason for that? Well, in human terms, we're all seeking happiness. We're all seeking pleasure. That's the baseline belief of ancient astrologers, is that naturally we pursue the good, the true, the beautiful. But in this material world, we pursue it in ways that are often like perverted distortions of the real thing. We pursue it through dominating others, through dominating Mother Earth, through harming each other, through harming ourselves, through lack of patience and compassion and so forth, right? So we compete, we dominate, we live with the idea that for me to be happy, someone else probably has to be losing. I have to be winning. Mars can kind of bring all of those features together with the general feeling of competition, dominance, assertiveness. There's no, we all want to be happy, but there's no like easy way to just go out and be like completely happy. We're always trying to modify and modulate everything, compete. There's stress, always involved in our daily pursuits of happiness, stretches out over decades and years. And you can feel like life is sort of a battle. So Mars kind of represents that feeling of strife and struggle and action and will that's involved with the pursuit of happiness in life in general. Now, when that's like, let's say you go and you have a nice workout, and you burn some calories, you get the heat turned on in your body, you're metabolizing things, and you have those, that breakthrough sweat, feels really good. So Mars is also good too. We enjoy the work of life, the daily round of the sun rising and setting, going out and doing things, being active. These are Mars like qualities as well. Now, compare that to Jupiter. If you think of Jupiter, you're thinking of a planet that is often associated with it's called the greater benefic, and has to do with that sense of greater unity. So what are the greater pieces of unity in our world? Think about it. Well, one of the things, I can look at my own life and say, what are the Jupiterian qualities of my life? I was raised in the church, which gave me a kind of overarching sort of moral umbrella to take shelter under, a metaphysical sense that reality is good, or that there's a God, that putting faith in the right virtues will lead to good things, that human beings are naturally good and trustworthy. Obviously people can fall, but redemption is important, forgiveness is important. These kinds of values or virtues, very Jupiterian. That education is good, that broad-minded learning is good, that open-minded exchange with other people, cultures, races, gender, sexual orientations, that there's some virtue in being open and learning from others. These tend to be, Jupiter's very broad-minded and tends to be very liberal in terms of the breadth of what it will consider and try to include. So now Jupiter could be sort of dogmatic. One of the things that Jupiter is trying to do is create some sense of ideological, philosophical shelter for us to live in and through. What guides our actions in life? What guides our pursuit of pleasure? Well, if depending on where Jupiter's at, what kind of relationship we have with Jupiter, some people may have completely different value systems. So if you think about Jupiter sort of generically, Jupiter is like the representation of all those institutions and larger societal, social, moral, educational structures that give our life some sense of cohesion, and togetherness. It's the legal system, it's the courts, it's the judges, it's anyone who wears the robes of knowledge within a well-respected profession, like doctors or people who have, Jupiter sometimes called the guru, and guru, among other things, among many different things that people will, a guru brings someone from light or from darkness to light. A guru also means heavy. So, if like a sponge, you pick it up, it's light. You dump it in water and you pick it up, it's super heavy. So Jupiter will also be those people in our lives that are like really rich with not only knowledge, but wisdom. So, Jupiter, of course, interesting, like when you pair Jupiter with Saturn, like we had a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at the winter solstice of last year. And Saturn will often represent the inevitable decay. So a society that's held together by some, a constitution. Well, eventually that, just like the Roman Empire, that things crumble, things fall apart. The guiding principles are somehow eternal, but their manifestation in earthly forms, those forms fall apart. Even the solar system, which gives us some sense of cohesion in our astrological language, will die someday. In the Bhagavad Purana, it's all sucked back into the pores into the body of Vishnu, and then it comes back out again cyclically. So all things end, all things pass. Jupiter is not the all things pass planet as much as it is the sense of everything having eternal, moral, philosophical cohesiveness. So when you take Mars and you put it in an opposition with Jupiter, which means there's going to be kind of binary tension between Mars, god of strength, vigor, dominance in Leo, right? The sign of the sun. So it's proud, it's bold, it's courageous, it's strong, it, can have a bit of an ego. And then you're pitting it against Jupiter in Aquarius, Saturn's sign. These have to, you could say Jupiter in Aquarius has to do with a kind of Saturnine wisdom. You'll see Jupiter in Aquarius in people's charts who have a great sense of their moral virtues, or the ideologies that hold their life together, are very aware of people who are excluded, or people who are on the outside, or people who are undermined or undervalued or underprivileged. Why? Because it's a Saturn sign. And so Jupiter with a dose of Saturn is always very aware of, what is shunned, or what sits on the margins. Those are Saturn Jupiter dynamics. Saturn Jupiter will also often be like a reformer or something like that. So you're looking right now at almost like an ideological confrontation with power, with strength, and what is the right way to do something, or what is the right moral or proper way of acting. So, for example, this is just one thing. I'm going to mention more of this tomorrow, because we're going to dive into this and kind of on a philosophical level a bit more tomorrow. But one of the things that I've noticed in being in jujitsu classes for just a couple months now is, they say that white belts, the people who have the lowest belt in the belt system, that they will often just kind of freak out. They say spaz out here, but I believe that the word spaz is pretty derogatory in England or the UK. I don't remember what it means, but so I'm always careful not to say that word, because I learned that one time that people said that's like a terrible word in the UK or something, and here it just means someone who is like doesn't have control of their energy, like they're being spazzy or something. They're being like crazy. They're being maybe bubbly or super bouncy or just like out of control. But at any rate, they'll say, there's a saying, it's like, white belts are like that. They're just kind of, when they're sparring, they'll just go all out and they'll try to use strength, and they don't really know what they're doing, and they'll just kind of freak out. So in a sense, Mars without Jupiter is like will without knowledge, or without some overarching principles. For example, when I'll be sparring with people who have higher belts, and I'm just learning all of this, and I'll notice like, oh, they're breathing so well. They're very careful about where and how they're moving. They come to victory, but it's very clear that they're being informed by things that they've learned. They've become wise with how to use their will. Right. So it's a very Mars Jupiter kind of thing. A good pairing of Mars and Jupiter is strong, bold, active, executive, but wise. And the Mars being married to some sense of the right virtues, or the right moral principles, the right way to act in different situations, the right ethical guidelines, the right beliefs. Really important that Mars energy gets paired with Jupiter in the right way. So if not, then you tend to have, the will degraded, and it doesn't have any guiding principles to work with. In this case, you could also think of Mars in Leo as the principle of the will and the ego and personal strength and power and authority. But there's something that's being missing, or some marginalized aspect that needs to be looked at. Something that sits on the outskirts of one's egoic awareness, some larger principles that need to be incorporated into the use of will or power or strength. And I feel like the reason that the jujitsu makes for good, and for good like analogies for me right now, is because so much of what I've learned so far is basically that just some wild egoic or use of strength or force or power really doesn't work. And I'm not the biggest guy in the world, but I've seen guys who are actually much bigger than me in these classes try those principles on with people who are significantly smaller, and it doesn't work. So I think that's really kind of been a metaphor for me anyway, or an analogy, because this is a time, as Mars has been applying to Jupiter for a little bit right now, of refining the use of will and ego to fit in with larger principles or larger values that we have in our life. So those are the combinations that I would look for. But ideological fervor, zeal, intensity, getting pumped up on steroids about what you believe, got to watch for that. Strength, you think of things like steroids, You think of victory or machismo, temper, inflation, dominance, all of those potentially negative traits can actually get amplified by Jupiter also. And then you think about the potential tempering of the nobility of Mars and Jupiter, like a knight. So those are kind of the themes that we're looking at this week. We're going to dive into more of that tomorrow, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other things that I've some of the other like personal lessons that I've had through going to these classes, and also some of the things. There's a series that I'm going to be doing coming up. It's actually been inspired by this transit and the earlier Mars Uranus Saturn transit, which was last year when I realized I had 10 years of astrology under my belt. I did a series called 10 Things I've Learned in 10 Years of Doing Professional Astrology. And it came to me that there's another series that I started taking notes to create for you guys on 10 years of being a yoga studio owner and what that taught me about life, but also about astrology. Because there's just there's a lot of things that you see when you're a yoga studio owner, about yoga, about health, about wellness, about people's mental states, and about spiritual transformation. So I'm gonna be doing another 10-part series on some of those observations, because as I was reflecting on it, I was like, there's some really good stuff to share here that people might find interesting. So we'll be doing that and kind of talking about how those insights, being a yoga studio owner, also really helped grow me as an astrologer. And hopefully there'll be some insights there for you guys as well. So more tomorrow on Mars and Jupiter. Later this week, we're going to have our overview for the month of August. August horoscopes coming out. I'm getting back into the swing of it again. So thank you guys for your patience. And as I've been on a little bit of a vacation break here, I hope you guys enjoyed the speaker series. If you guys checked it out, the replays are on the website. Go to nightlightastrology.com. You can see some of the recent speakers that gave talks with us. I think that's it for now. All right. We'll see you guys soon. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.